Can people hear me now? I think we should be right now. Oh, fuck yeah. Can you hear me now? Yes. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. There's been a change in the system somehow. Anyway, I'm underway. Sorry about the delay. Let's rock and roll. Welcome to today's session entitled Maximising Website Traffic and Engagement. I promise to make sure that you're away by midday, if not a few minutes earlier. But thanks for attending. Okay, let's get underway then. Today's event sponsored by me, of course, DQ Australia, which I'll tell you a little bit about later, and of course, your old friends, the local government professionals. I'm John Carlson. My background is in psychology, education, and business. My business is about consumer behaviour management. I'm a behavioural scientist, company director and marketing advisor, and I've been advising the public and private sectors, including local government, for about 25 years. Today's session is entitled, as you know, Maximising Website Traffic and Engagement. And I'm going to put a little more emphasis on the engagement than on the traffic. And it'll become clear why as we go along. People talk a lot about generating traffic, and I will too. But engagement to me is every bit as important an issue. We need people to engage with the site and actually get some value out of it. Just some thoughts to get the session underway. Contrary to popular belief, this is not all about SEO. And most SEO consultants I've encountered promise the world and deliver an atlas. They also promise it in an unrealistic time frame. I will talk about SEO. It is important, perhaps less important for local government than it is for many organisations, but it is important. And at the end, I will talk about how you go about finding a consultant that is going to not promise the world, but will deliver the world instead of an atlas. Because consultants can be helpful, but much of what's essential, or much of the things I will talk about today are things you can do in-house, often by very junior people with low levels of skill, and don't need a consultant. Certainly in terms of engagement, consultants are not as important. Just some stats to get us underway. Anybody that's attended my webinars before knows that I love stats. 70 to 80% of consumers research online before visiting a person or making a purchase now. I think that highlights just how important a website is. 75% of consumers make judgments on an organisation's credibility based on their websites. I mean, I find that frightening, but it's true. So if your website's not up to standard, people make a judgment about the organisation based on that. In fact, 3/4 of people make an assessment based on that. The third stat, 98% of consumers have failed to complete a transaction or do what they want to do online because of incomplete or incorrect content. The accuracy, the completeness, and the currency of the information on a website is of critical importance. And if those things are not present, and we'll come back to this through the webinar, it will do you damage. And finally, I know local government is not small business, but the stat is nonetheless interesting. 97% of small business websites are considered ineffective. That is, they simply don't generate the traffic that people want or are looking for. And they don't get the engagement that's being looked for. So today I'm going to talk about three things: action, engagement, attraction, that's bringing people to your site, engagement, and reattraction. All of them are important. So let's start with, well, as I say, attraction, engagement, and reattraction. Let's start with attraction. Attraction, while important, is possibly not the critical issue for local government. You want to attract people to your website, but investing heavily in SEO and those kinds of things may not be as relevant to local government, given that people know the name of the local government and can guess the address and can readily find it. Notwithstanding this, you can't ignore the importance of attraction, and particularly attracting people to the pages you want them to go to. But it's important to remember when somebody's going to charge you $1,500 a month for SEO, that people know your brand, they know you exist, and they know how to find you by search already. So SEO, in terms of finding your organisation, is less important than it is for many other organisations like mine, for example. Some stats again to get this moving. 93% of online experiences start with a search on Google or Bing. As an aside there, the most used search engine now is Google, of course. The most used browser is Chrome. And if you want to get the best results, you should be using Chrome and certainly not Explorer or one of the older platforms. But most people search on either Google or Bing. In fact, 93% do. 67% of click-throughs go to the first 5 organic listings. Now, that's a really important point if you want to come to the top of the heap. If you're not in the top 5 listings, you're not playing the game. If the issue you want people to look for is not in the top 5 organic listings, you're not in the game. And that's just a fact of life. 75% of users never scroll past the first page. Well, think about your own habits. How often do you go past the first page to go to the second page or whatever of a search engine? You generally don't. Another point, SEO is 6 times more effective than SEM. SEM being AdWords or search engine marketing. In terms of cost benefit, SEO is 6 times more effective. It attracts a lot more traffic. People trust organic listings on search engines much more than they trust marketing listings. 75% of Australians now search using voice. Now, I was a bit surprised with this number, so I checked it out a bit, and it is pretty accurate. That doesn't mean they always search by voice, but they generally or are increasingly searching using voice. Some of the predictions suggest that by the end of next year, almost every search will be by voice. And that's a really important thing, because the type of search engine optimization you need to do is very different for voice than it is for typed in entries. 20% of mobile queries are now voice search. Now, when people use a mobile device, now 20% of them tend to use a voice search. And one of the reasons why voice searches are different to typed in searches is we generally say different things to what we type for whatever reason, but we do. And we generally say longer sentences than we type. So the approach you take to SEO is a little bit different. And finally, 1.5 million Australians have a voice-activated smart speaker in their home now. I'm not one of them, and I was amazed to see that number, but that is the truth of it. So people are sitting in the lounge room and yelling out to Alexia or whatever, what events are on this weekend in the city of Perth or whatever the case might be. So voice is becoming increasingly important. And my view is that by the end of next year and certainly early the following year, the majority of searches will be by voice. And the reason for that's simple. It's just easier. Right, so some key points out of that. Search engine optimization is critical for business in general and important for local government, especially for non-core issues. That is, you wouldn't invest a lot in doing search engine optimization for the city of Perth, for example, or the city of Bunbury, because people know that brand and will search by it. But if there are individual issues like an event which is coming up, or functions, or city markets or whatever, those things, you'll need to devote resources to SEO. And search engine optimization is more effective than search engine marketing or paid search. So you can use paid search, but don't rely on it. Focus more on search engine optimization. And voice search, which requires very different strategies, I've said, is growing in both in popularity and will ultimately dominate. It is the way of the future. So some points on effective search engine optimization. Ensure that your website is optimized using the right keywords, meta tags, header tags, alt tags, and internal links. I'm sure all of you are well aware of this, but your content needs to have the right keywords in it. And the right keywords are, of course, the keywords that your market will search by. So you need to understand what they search by, and there are a variety of tools which can tell you what terms people most frequently search by. But that's the first thing. Make sure embedded in your copy and in your headlines and in your meta tags are the keywords that people search by. So if they search what's happening this weekend, or if they search markets, or whatever it is they search, make sure those keywords are embedded in your content and in your headings and in your meta tags. Recognize the power of local search, embracing the fact that 75% of customers who perform a local search act that day. So this is really important, I think, for local government. And there are, you can tailor your SEO strategy to address local search. Google is getting a lot better at that, and consultants are getting a lot better at that. And of course, most of your traffic would be local, not all, I'm aware, but a lot of it would be. And local searches tends to be acted upon more frequently and more quickly. So look at local search. A fourth point is long tail searches. Now, there is a theory, there has always been a theory, if you like, that people search short, just type in markets. But they tend not to do that these days. More and more people will type in markets open this Sunday. 3, 4, or even 5 word phrases. And these are the kinds of phrases that now need to be catered for in your SEO. So think about the whole phrase that people will type in. The longer, long tail phrase is now the majority of searches and must be addressed in SEO. So it's not just about ensuring single words are in your content. It's also about ensuring that phrases are addressed. And finally, make sure search results appear more attractive by adding schema markups and rich snippets. They're the little summaries that go underneath your listing on the Google search page. The rich snippets, this is the kind of information you'll find on this site, or snippets of information from the site. Make sure those snippets are the right ones and that they generate interest. So somebody's come to the search engine, they've searched markets open on a Sunday, and then your listing must come up, and the snippets must be one that say, yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is exactly the thing I should click on. Bearing in mind that all of this happens very quickly, and people search quickly and don't spend a lot of time on each page. So the critical information needs to jump out at them. So it needs to be brief and really, really on message, getting back to those key words, the key things they're looking for. So again, make sure you're using the right keywords. Embrace local search. Look at long tail searching, long phrases, and make your search results appear more attractive by using schema markups and rich snippets. If you're using a consultant, perhaps it's worth sitting down and having a chat to them about those 4 things which can help drive your search engine optimization. If your concern is more broadly just driving traffic to your website, there are a range of other considerations you should look at. They include online display advertising or search engine marketing, of course. That will drive traffic to your site, and certainly all of your communication should have your website address on it. And whenever it's online, that website address should be live and provide a direct link, not just to the site, but to the relevant page on the site, the page relevant to the ad or the notice that people see. Social media advertising is becoming increasingly popular and really important, and can be really effective. It can also be really cost effective. So make sure you're engaging with and using Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, those 3 in particular, but perhaps others, and making the most of those in terms of driving traffic to your website. Influencer marketing. This can work in a number of ways. You can have individuals recommending through their sites or through their material that people visit your site. You can also have cross links with other organisations where they, you've seen the highlighted links in articles that you read, where they put you behind a highlighted link so that somebody comes to your site to read more information. That's the fourth of those points there. Links from authoritative websites. So if somebody goes to the local sports club website, it says these facilities are provided by the City of Bunbury, and that's highlighted. They click on that and go to the City of Bunbury website. So all of your colleagues and associates and all of those organisations you work with should embed in their site links to your site, and you might in turn embed in your site links to their site. And also associated with that, the influencer marketing, using high-profile individuals or celebrated individuals to promote your site as a source of information. So the four other considerations: using online advertising. Of course, the most common is search engine marketing, but also display advertising in general. Using social media, but on both of those, always making sure your website address is there and that it's live, or even that they can click on the ad and it takes them straight through to your site, and ideally the relevant page of your site. Influencer marketing is high-profile people to promote your site, and then links to and from other authoritative or frequently visited websites. So all of those things will drive traffic to your site. My feeling is that getting traffic to a local government website is not a huge challenge, and any SEO consultant that tells you it's difficult is being disingenuous. I think it's pretty easy to get there. What's really hard is to get them engaged and to keep them coming back and to see the site as a reliable, ongoing source of information. I think that engagement is the critical issue for local government. You don't want people just to visit your site. You want them to go throughout your site and find all the information that's relevant or interesting to them and get full value from the site. That is engagement. It is one thing to attract visitors, but it's quite another thing to have them engage with the site and use it in the way that it's designed to be used. You want them to spend a lot of time on your site. You want them to get the information they want from your site. You want them to feel that it's so informative they should come back again. This is where the real trick lies. Just some stats relevant to engagement. And I think these are arguably the most important statistics I'll talk about during the course of today. 38% of people will stop engaging with the website if the content or layout is unattractive. It might sound odd, but it really is important that the site looks good. Now, it's also important not to over-design it, but it needs to look good, and the content needs to look like it's easy to read and easy to consume. 50% of sales, although sales aren't directly relevant to you, the principle is 50% of sales are lost because consumers can't find the content they're looking for. People won't give you that many clicks. They might give you 1, 2, or even 3, but that's it. They need to get to the information they want quickly. If you embed the information deep in your site, it will get lost, it will not be visited, and in fact, the only thing that will bring people to it will be if you have external links on advertising or other materials. So make sure the information is easy to access. My experience with local government sites is that they're not that strong in terms of the information you want being easy to access. A lot of the terminology is very local government and not consumer friendly. And, that might be appropriate for you, but for the consumer, if they can't find the words they're looking for, then they're going to stop searching. 70% of viewers look at lists with bullets, while 55% look at lists without. The point there is use bullet points a lot. The shorter, sharper, more focused the points can be, the more likely they'll be read. It's why I use points here. People read points now, they don't read long narrative. No matter how interesting you think it is, online, people don't read long narrative unless, of course, they're academics or whatever, and most of the people you're talking to aren't. 39% of people will stop engaging with the website if images won't load or take too long to load. We are talking about an incredibly impatient and an increasingly impatient target audience. People will not give you a lot of time. Your photos need to download instantly. The site needs to load instantly. 80% of adults think that a company's website, when viewed on a mobile device, should be as good or as better as it is on a desktop. I'll talk about the use of mobile devices in a minute, but mobile devices are the future. As much as voice is the future, mobile devices are the future. It might surprise you to know that 60% of consumers now shop using a mobile device. 60% of consumers research using a mobile device and 30% shop using a mobile device. And this is growing by the day. And it's not just young people. That's mythology. It is right across the market. 44% of website visitors will leave a website if their contact information is not clearly visible. They need to know exactly who they should call. They need that information to be clear and in their face. And 61% of digital media time is spent on mobile devices, or 61%, that was the point I was referring to, and only 39% on desktop devices now. It's about mobile now. It's about mobile, it's about voice, it's about short bites of information that are easy to consume. And I know that a lot of these points you'll find counsellors and older people saying to you, but our market's different. No, it's not. Your market is the same. So just some of the key takeouts from that stats and some key points to take away from the whole session. High quality content is the most critical issue. If you don't have high quality content, then you're going to fail. And by high quality content, I mean the content your consumer wants to read, presented in a way they want to read it. They don't want to read what you think's important. They want to read what they think's important. And you need to get in their head and give them the content that they think is important, and you need to present it in a way that's easy to consume. Attractive design is a critical issue. One of the flaws I find in local government sites is they like to get really involved, elaborate designs, which when you look at them look spectacular. But it's a simple, straightforward design that drags the consumer in and creates the impression that the site is easy to use and easy to engage with. Third point, functionality and ease of use are critical. People are not going to work hard to work out how to use your site. You need the right menu, right menu items, you need the right sub-menu items, and you need to use terminology they understand, they relate to. So it's about them. It's not about using in language. And they need to find where they want to go quickly. The site images need to load instantly. If images on any part of your site go chug, 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 you've got a problem and they are not patient with it. Mobile responsiveness is not an option. Your site needs to work as well on a smartphone as it does on a desktop, an iPad, or a full-size television screen. It'll work differently, but it needs to work as well. Not nearly as well, because that's where the future is. And contact information must be visible. Fail to address any of these 6 points and you will reduce the level of engagement significantly. In terms of content, ensure that all of your content is pithy, if not taciturn. Use bullet points ahead of narrative. Now, they're just not as interested in reading the narrative as the author was in writing it. So keep it to the point. Ensure content is relevant and that it directly addresses the issues of greatest interest to the visitor. Sure, you've got to put your information across to them, but first and foremost, they've got to get what they're looking for. Wherever possible, use video content. 80% of all time online in 2020 involves video. I said earlier that voice search is the future. I said earlier that mobile phones are the future. Video is also the future. The majority of content on websites into the future, or at least the majority accessed and used, will be video. There is no question about that whatsoever. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go and get a video production company. The market is quite accepting of mobile phone video. They're quite accepting of amateur video, but they want it in video because they can see it, they can hear it, they can engage with it with a minimum of effort. And that's really what video is all about. The growth in video is enormous. And in almost every sector, people are demanding video as a way of understanding the issues. If you can present it in a 3-minute video, record it on your mobile phone and placed on your site, you'll find it's much more consumed than 3 or 4 pages of copy. Wherever possible, use interactive components to involve and engage visitors. Ask for their opinion, ask for their thoughts, ask them to complete a poll, give them a calculator so they can work out something for themselves, what their rates are likely to be, or whatever the case might be. Give them videos they can click on. Whatever you can do to engage them so they're not just looking at the site passively, the better the content will be. And incorporate a staffed and responsive chat capability on your site. And that's the next. I said it again, I said voice is the future, mobile is the future, video is the future, chatbots are the future. You need to have a chatbot on your site, and it needs to be staffed. You need to have the staffing capability throughout. Chatbots, of course, can also use artificial intelligence and operate without staffing 24/7. But one way or the other, whether it's by a human being or through the use of chatbot AI technology, you need to have that capacity for people to communicate with a site immediately to go on it. The reality is that about 54% of consumers now expect a site to be responsive to their needs 24/7. And you need to address this in your program. So make your content pithy, taciturn, and relevant. Use video. Engage interactive components and allow them to chat with you. Some of the design issues, firstly, don't make spelling mistakes like I have in the first line. The design must facilitate fast loading. So overly complex designs, of course, can slow the loading speed. Small thing, most people don't make that mistake anymore. The design must facilitate responsiveness. It must be a design that can work on a mobile device, and particularly a small mobile phone. And don't be deceived and think, oh, business wouldn't use a mobile phone. It's only consumers that use a mobile phone. That's not true. Mobile phones will become the dominant source of search in the very near future, and people will use voice to do it. The design must facilitate mobile response. The design needs to accommodate SEO, so you need to design it in a way that SEO is facilitated, not limited. And there are a number of design features that can limit the effectiveness of SEO. The design must be visually appealing. That doesn't mean it needs to be a work of art. That doesn't mean it needs to be designed by the world's greatest graphic designer, but it needs to be visually appealing. It needs to be warm, and it needs to engage people. The font needs to be of a size that is readable and a style that is appealing. Small type is a real problem. That's not a mistake the local government often makes, but it is an issue you need to bear in mind. Simplicity is central to effective design, functionality, and communication. If you can make it simpler, make it simpler. The simpler, the better. People do not want to work to use your site or indeed any other facility or communication tool you offer. Consistently Consistency, so make sure the design flows right throughout your site. Make sure the approach to functionality runs consistently right through the site. Consistency makes the site easy to use. It also communicates a greater level of credibility. Make it consistent. And the functionality must be intuitive. So one of the things I always do when I'm involved in clients who have websites built, although I don't build them myself, is I go through and say, let's get your target audience to play with the site. Let's get them to have it. Let's get half a dozen of them in a room, give them a terminal each, and bring the site up before it goes live, of course, and get them to play with it. Is it intuitive? And ask them. Find out when the next council meeting is, and let them all do it. And if they can find it quickly, great. If they can't, find out why not and what you have to adjust. But make it intuitive, and with all of these things, learn from the customer. If you can get half a dozen members of the target audience in a room to test the website before it goes live, that's a really, really good idea, and you can address all of these issues. I'll come back to some of those issues as we go along, but now I'll move on to the issue of reattraction. That is, once they've visited the site, how do you get them back? That to me is the biggest challenge. And one of the reasons it's the biggest challenge is that the content on websites are not updated frequently enough. If I go there and see what's there once, and I go again and find it's the same, I'm not going to go a third time because there's nothing new. Reattraction is a real problem for many organisations. Attracting visitors the first time is challenging. Getting them back a second time is more challenging. Getting them back repeatedly is very difficult indeed. Just some stats on that. 88% of online consumers are less likely to return to a site after a bad experience. If people can't find what they want quickly, they don't come back. They don't complain and they don't come back. If your site's not intuitive, if your site doesn't provide the information they're looking for, if the content is not right, and if they don't relate to the design, they just won't come back. And they won't complain, and you'll never know it didn't work well. 25% of websites reviewed had no substantial update in content in 12 months. You should be updating the content weekly, if not daily. One of the powers of the online environment is the capacity to update inexpensively every day, if not every hour, if not every half hour. If you're not putting new content on there at least weekly, you've got a problem. And by new content, I don't mean the council minutes or the committee minutes. Sure, that needs to go on too, perhaps, but it's the other things. It's the events. It's the interesting information. It's whatever it is that people in your area want to know. And at the minute information gets out of date, your site becomes less effective and people don't come back. 77% of consultancies, that is digital consultancy, believe that a bad website user experience is a weakness for their clients. That's not a good message for the consultants either, but the reality is the user experience, according to these consultants, is such that the likelihood of somebody coming back to the site is low. My experience of local government sites is they range from the fantastic through to the awful, as they do with any private sector industry. But more often than not, they don't offer a great user experience. More often than not, they're designed in a way that makes councillors feel comfortable or the administration feel comfortable. They're not designed in a way where they facilitate communication, and they certainly don't engage the consumer in the development of the site. 63% of global internet use by the end of 2019 involved a mobile device. Again, I'm going back to that mobile thing. If your site's doesn't work as well on a mobile device, they won't come back. And they won't say, oh, I better go and view this on a desktop. They don't think like that. They will just use the device they always use. And 94% of negative website feedback was design related. So in one survey, they asked people about what do you do and don't like about this site. 94% of it was about the design. The design really is important. I mean, I find that a bit ludicrous Surely the information is more important. But no, the design is important to people and needs to be addressed. So some of the key points here: update your content as often as possible, giving visitors a reason to come back. If nothing's updated, if nothing's changed, why would I come back? Ensure your site offers an enjoyable customer experience or user experience with a great design and easy, intuitive functionality. If it's easy to use the site, I'm more likely to come back and use it again. Ensure the site is mobile responsive. If I search on my phone, I want to be able to use it on my phone. And stay in touch with the visitors on your site. When people visit and have input, respond to them. Engage with them where you can. The chat facility is a way of doing that. But also if they type in, if they send you an email, respond to that email and respond at length and make sure they feel welcome to come back to the site at any time in the future and ask a question again. I just thought I'd spend a few minutes now talking about my perceptions of some of the local government sites that I've looked at. And I've looked at them all over the world, but particularly focused on Western Australia. And these are some of my feelings from just surveying them across the board. SEO is not the most critical issue for local government. It is an important issue, and particularly with regard to non-core issues like the markets or events or whatever, the SEO could be significantly improved by better keywords, the better use of long tail, that is long keyword phrases, and the better use of snippets. There are things you can do, and embedding the keywords in the copy. Mobile responsiveness is generally poor. For most local governments I come across, the site works considerably worse on a mobile device than it does on a desktop device. That is a problem now, and that will become a bigger problem. The design standard range from appalling to sensational. Some of them are, to put no finer point on it, sensational. Some of them are really, really good. Others are really, really awful. And the ones that are awful tend to be those that are over-designed. They forget that they're not painting the Mona Lisa here. They're creating something which is for communication purposes, which has got to be well designed but clean and looking like it's easy to use. The content quality ranges from appalling to acceptable. Appalling mostly because it's always written from the point of view of the local government and rarely written from the point of view of the consumer. It's always written with the local government's needs in mind, not with the consumer's needs in mind. It's always written with the point of view of what you want to communicate rather than from what they want to know about. The standard writing is fine, but it's not written in a way that's designed to engage the reader. It's written in a formal, stuffy way. And I'm aware that's essential for the minutes of meetings and things like that, because that's the way they're recorded, or for the agendas, or for the papers being submitted to committee meetings or council meetings. But for other material, it needs to be written in a warm, friendly, engaging way, using language that the consumer uses. Content is often too long, and there is too much detail and too much narrative. Bullet points are king. Now, that's not a criticism just of local government. That's a criticism of websites in general. And it's a sad reflection of the fact that we're reading less and less. And video is rarely used on council websites. Okay, somebody's just sent a note saying she'd like to have a look at some of the sensational sites. When I send this out to you all today, you'll all get a copy of this presentation. I'll send you some links to such sites as well. And I'll just make a note of that. Okay, so you need to keep the content short and taciturn. The content needs to be customer focused, not council focused. And I get the impression that local government still has a fear of social media, doesn't really want to get engaged with social media. And social media is such an important part of driving traffic to your website, such an important part of communicating with your consumer. And it needs to be built into your site. You need to accommodate social media, and you need to realize that these things are being said whether you're participants in the conversation or not. You need to understand the conversation, and you need to actively participate in those conversations. And the customer is often not the center of the planning or the content. That is my overwhelming impression. It's written for the sake of councillors and senior management. It's not written to communicate. I said at the beginning I'd make some comments at the end about appointing a consultant. And I guess most local governments will employ a consultant to build the website and to look at the ongoing promotion and communication requirements. So I thought it's worth just making a few points about what would work well for you. The first point is appointing the right consultant should not focus on technology or price. You know, all too often, businesses in particular, but local government too, appoint consultants because they brag about their technology capabilities. I've got to tell you, building a good website now is not about technology. The technology is simple. It's all about understanding consumers. It's understanding how to build something which is functional, something which looks good, something which communicates effectively, something which is easy to use. Those are the issues they need to understand. The technology is a secondary issue. And the focus on price, getting the lowest possible price, is bizarre too, because your site stays there for a long time. And if it's right, it will give you a huge return on investment. If it's wrong, it will give you a poor return on investment for the long term. It's best to find a consultant who understands your audience, understands how to build, how to design a site that an audience will engage with, how to build a site that that provides for the right kind of content, how to build a site that facilitates SEO, how to build a site that is easy to use. Those are the critical issues you need to know about. Not do they program in .NET, Java or whatever else, and not how many complicated sites have they built over time. The technology is really simple now, particularly for the sorts of things that local government do. If you're getting into e-commerce and stuff, it starts to get a bit more complex, but it's pretty simple. So don't be blown away by the technology. It's all about being a great communicator. Avoid any consultant who talks in jargon and tries to blind you with science. There is a bit of science in this, but it's not about science. And in my experience, and I've dealt with hundreds of digital consultants, if they use jargon, they don't know what they're talking about. They should be able to speak in plain English, and it is pretty easy to explain. Avoid any consultant who promises short-term results. There are no short-term results. You want to get a website to work well, it will take time to develop. You want SEO to work well, it will take months for it to take hold. None of this happens quickly. And don't engage anyone that's not prepared to be held accountable. You know, they'll tell you we'll drive you X number of hits per month. Okay, so how are you going to guarantee that? How are you going to be held accountable for that? Because in my experience, that's a lot easier to say than it is to do. They all say it, and very, very few of them do it. And finally, avoid any consultant who says you need to outsource all of the tasks. You probably do need to outsource parts of the SEO. You probably do need to outsource the construction of the site. You probably do need to outsource the hosting of the site. And there are things you will need to outsource. But a lot of the stuff is much better provided from an in-house environment where there's a higher level of understanding of the audience and a higher level of understanding of the content. And if the site's built right, it just isn't that complicated. In summary then, appoint a top-line SEO consultant. Certainly don't appoint anyone that sends you an email saying you should be appointing us because we're wonderful. In my experience, any consultant that resorts to email doesn't understand SEO. So engage consultants who appoint stop-line SEO consultant, sorry, who talks in plain English and provides a realistic time frame. Appoint a web developer that understands consumer behaviour and communication. They are the critical issues. It's how will people respond with this site, not how clever is the technology. It is how will people respond to this design, not how intricate is it. We're not looking for a Mona Lisa. We're not looking for a Sistine Chapel. We're looking for something which facilitates communication. My biggest concern about graphic designers is when they start to think they're artists. A great graphic designer is a wonderful thing to have, and it's a great skill, but it's the skill of communication, not the skill of art. Ensure that quality in terms of content and design takes absolute precedence over quantity. If initially, so the content is of a high quality, the site needs to be smaller and less comprehensive, so be it. It is not about jamming everything you possibly can on the site. It's about putting on the site information that communicates effectively the points, the information that the consumer is looking for. Ensure the site is easy to use and absolutely intuitive. I have come across very few local government sites that are intuitive. I've come across very few business sites that are intuitive either. But if you look at the great marketers, their sites are absolutely, the Apples of this world, the Zaras of this world, their sites are absolutely intuitive. And because they get the language from the consumer, they ask the consumer what language you use, and they use that language themselves. They ask the consumer, what will you search first? What will you search second? What will you search third, etc. And so they build the site to fit in with the consumer's intuition. Embrace trends like responsiveness, voice search, video, as much as you possibly can. That's where, by responsiveness, of course, I mean mobile responsiveness. And put the customer at the centre of the website decision. I don't know how many sites I come across where the consumer has never been asked anything before it was built. So I'm communicating with someone who I've never taken the time to really understand what they're looking for, how they use the site, what they will and won't respond to. That seems to me like a pretty risky business. Whereas if you look at the likes of the big commercial operators like the Apples, the Zaras, the Nikes, the Reeboks, these people, their sites have been designed, they call it co-creation, in conjunction with their customers. So they get groups of customers in the room and talk to them about what are the issues of interest to you, how do you search, get into their head, work out what works for them and do it. Then you're in the communication business. That's about it for this webinar. Again, my apologies for the glitches at the beginning. I'm more than happy to address any of the issues in this webinar personally, so feel free to email me or to call me. My email address, as you can see, is john@linkintegrated.com. My phone number is 0402 273 350. I will send you a copy of this presentation and I'll send you a couple of great sites. This is my site if you want to go to it and get more information on any of the issues we've discussed, www.djohncarlsonesq.com. The next webinar, which is coming up in a couple of months in conjunction with DQ Australia again and the local government professionals, is Build Your Brand Cost Effectively with Social Media. I'll work on some of my criticism earlier on about local governments not really engaging with social media, and I'll show you how you can engage with it quite effectively to build your brand. Again, thanks to me, but thanks to DQ Australia and the local government professionals for sponsoring this. Thanks for participating. I will have a copy to you by the end of the day, and I'll have a couple of examples of at least very good websites to you by the end of the day. And I've also had a question about what is my opinion of market creations. I'll have to familiarise myself with them, and I'll come back to you on that as well. Thanks for attending today. Again, apologies for the glitch at the beginning. Have a good day.